So perfect. Yeah, let's get started. Okay. I think we had a 1 day break, and I think everybody's fresh to get started with the actual API build. So today we will be building a blogging API, which will be able to create blog posts, or it might be able to get you blog content. We are basically gonna build a complete backend solution for blogging app. So basically, after we do this, anybody will be able to create a blogging front end and essentially build a blogging app out of it. Okay, so shall we get started? Okay. Cool. So today we will be looking at a few concepts that will be very important. I just want to know how many of you are into database management systems, DBMS, or have any idea of what DBMS means. Guys, you can quickly unmute, just to set the tone. Okay, so ever heard of foreign keys? Okay, what are foreign keys? How might they be useful? Yeah, perfect. So when you want some related data along with a particular information that we are trying to retrieve, which is available on another table, right? So essentially, there seems to be a relation between one resource and another resource. So whenever you try to get an information from this one resource, and when you want as the associated resources from the other table, you would probably set up a foreign key. Okay, in any DBMS system, indexing is one of the very crux of data retrieval. Can somebody help me? What does this word indexing provoke in your mind? What do you think when I say indexing? ID. Okay, leave out DBMS. Generally, what is an index? What's an index? A position. When you talk about array, you say position. Okay. Any other context? It shows where the contents are. Okay. Where do you find do you find indexes anywhere else other than computers, or leave out DBMS? Where do you find indexes? Notebooks. Okay, be more specific. What you might have. So I think you got there, right? We are there. So in any notebook, you have this index page on the front, which you essentially use to find content, right? So let's say you have a record, your computer science practicals record, and why would somebody need to have an index on that book? Why would somebody need an index? Can somebody help? Can easily navigate to the page that I want, right? Okay, so that any index would probably help you to find information quickly. So without an index, what would you do? Let's take the example of the computer science record. So usually, let's say you are the evaluating personnel, and you are trying to correct this record. So what would you do without an index? So let's say you need to correct a particular experiment. The student asks that you go and correct my 14th experiment. How do you do that? Yes, perfect. You turn to all the pages, starting from the first page. Yes, right? So this is very, this is the same thing that's happening essentially with all your database records. Okay, so you have a DB. A DB is essentially a collection of records. So think of it as a book which contains a lot of pages. Okay, so whenever you try to query information, you talk to the DB engine, and this DB engine will be able to match a query and get it back to you. But if you don't give it an index, you know the answer. What happens if you don't give an index? How would this DB engine be able to get information? What happens? We even saw an example. What happens if you don't provide an index? Yes, of course, I will be able to retrieve data, but what's the other thing? You just gave me the answer a few minutes back. Of course. Exactly. So in this scenario, if I don't have an index on a database management system, I will probably have to run down every single records from the first till the end of the end of the records until I find the matched query, right? But if I set up an index, let's say I have a index that probably allocates this is this and this is this. So now if I need a particular data, it's more easy, right? Because I can just go straight away to the index, and now I know in which page number this might be. So I just skip the first 20 pages. I'll just go and find the information, right? Isn't this easy for us? So that's what we are trying to achieve here in database management systems. Okay, in any DBMS, it's very, very important that you set up certain index. It's important that you set up certain keys. Okay, so does anybody remember, or does anybody recall what is a primary key? Perfect. Yeah. So in any database, I'm just covering a few basic paradigms so that we can straight away get into coding with DBMS. So database. The thing is, you have a primary key. I'm just gonna cover a few important keys that you might need to know when it comes to backend development and when it comes to actual production grade software. Okay. You have a primary key, and this primary key, like Veroni told, is unique. So each record needs to have a primary key, and by a primary key, I must be able to retrieve any information by providing this primary key. So let's say we have indexed this DB, and this index would probably know where this particular primary key would be residing in the DB. So our DB engine, let's say in our case it's a Postgres engine, and now provided that it already has an index and now it has a key, it can straight away go and match, okay, this key is there in this index, and since the DB is indexed, I'll be able to retrieve information in lightning speeds, right? Are we being clear here? So do you get why we need indexing and why what is the importance of having these keys? Okay, perfect. Similarly, we have another key. Okay, this key is usually called foreign keys. Okay, so let me show you my screen. So let's say you have two tables, and okay, I think I had it. Okay, so here you have two tables. You have a customers table and you have an orders table. So in what would you have in orders table? Of course, in customers table you have the list of customers and orders. It's self-explanatory. But the thing that you need to look over at here is, if you look at the customer ID in the orders table, it says it's a foreign key. So what it essentially means is, whenever you declare a field in any table to be a foreign key on another table, so let's say we have orders table And of course, if I retrieve any information from the orders table, it's going to return me an ID, it's going to return me a date, it's going to return me a customer ID, it's going to return me an amount. So I have 4 information that I can retrieve from the orders table, right? I mean, is this clear with everybody? This is very common, right? In given a table, you have the 4 attributes. You have an ID, a date, a customer ID, and an amount. The 4 attributes available on this table. And if I take customers, you have 5: ID, name, age, address, and the salary, right? So this is very, the basic, everybody knows this. But let's say I need to get all the orders that match under a particular query, and not just the order information. I need to get all the customer information along with associated with the order information. So here foreign key enters the game, right? So since you have customer ID declared as a foreign key to the customer's table, if you look at this comment, it says cust ID, the customer ID, it's an integer, it's a foreign key that refers the customer's table, okay? And over customer's table, you point the ID. So it essentially means that the orders table has an implicit link to the customer's table, okay? By an implicit link, I mean that whenever you require any information from this orders table, you can get associated information from the customer's table. So let's give it an example. So you are trying to get an order that matches a particular ID. Let's say it's 5. So I try to match with this orders table, and of course I'll be getting one record that matches this particular order. I give it an order ID, I get a particular order. But not just the order details, I want the customer details associated along with it. So now, since it's properly implicitly linked within the DB engine, my DB engine won't find it hard, it won't find it hard getting me the associated information from the other table, right? Now you have this foreign key, and it knows that, okay, this is cumulative data that I need to get along from that, okay? But if you don't have this foreign key, what happens? Can somebody get me through the flow of the same requirement that I just told you now without using a foreign key? What happens if I do that? I think most of you would have done that. I think we have the Cortex team. So before you did all of these without foreign keys, right? What were you doing? Let's say you have to get an order and associated customer details along with that order. What would you do? Perfect. So you will write multiple queries. First, you'll go talk to the orders table, get information. You have an array of orders or probably one order. Match that, take the customer ID from that order information. Again, query the customer's table, get the information. Now there are 2 calls to the DB engine. At the DB layer, you have 2 different query calls. So usually it's a matter of milliseconds, but it won't matter. But if you take huge volumes of data where you have Facebook and you don't have really a small set of records to go through. It's like millions and billions of records. Over there, you cannot do this. You cannot afford to lose the number of API calls, DB calls to the backend, right? So here, when you have a foreign key, now you know how things would be easier. You can just talk to the orders table. It gets you the associated foreign relations and gets you the all associated information, right? So now it made things easier for you. It got you the related data along with it. Am I being clear here? So everybody knows what foreign keys are, because the things that we are about to do over the next couple of minutes has a lot to do with foreign keys. Cool. So take this as a rule. In any database design, you would probably need to have a foreign key set up. So if you don't have a foreign key in your DB design, it means that you didn't properly design a DB. So a database essentially means a collection of related data, and by related you mean it's related. So how do you relate? Using these foreign keys. So if you see any database designs without any foreign keys, you can straight up go and say, see, your design is straight up dumb and it's not gonna work. So yep, so we'll get right into actual programming of how we do it through Prisma, right? Shall we get started? Shall we? Cool. I want you to open your VS Code and get ready with the code. We're gonna start right where we stopped. Okay, so shall we begin? Is everybody ready with your VS Code? I hope you are ready with the VS Code. It's not going to take a lot of time. So what I want you to do is, I want you to have a clean database, right? So over the last session, I told you to clean the database and make sure that there's nothing in the DB. Is it clean now? I mean, you all have an empty database, right? You can verify if you have an empty DB by opening the Beekeeper Studio and check if there's nothing. And if you have any tables in it, I want you to drop those tables, right? Dropping tables means removing it. So for the ones who don't know, connect to the DB, check if there are any tables. Don't ignore what I'm doing. Never mind. Yep, let's get back. And now you should have an empty Prisma file. I want you to open the schema.prisma file. So over the schema, I want you to remove all the previous models. So we are going to start with a clean slate. Okay. So once you've cleared all the models that were pre-existing on the schema.prisma file, I want you to paste this following schema. We will look at what the schema means, but I just want you to do this. So let me just quickly paste the schema for you. Head over to the coders chat channel and copy this piece of code. Copy it, paste it in your schema.prisma file. After doing that, I mean, if you've done that, react to that code. Okay, let me walk you through what we are going to do next. So we now have a schema. I just wanted you to copy that schema because we have a same DBs to work with, right? Of course, if you feel that you can follow with a different schema, or if you can, do a dev along with me while building a different API, of course you are welcome to do so. You can build any other API other than a blogging API that I am about to build. Okay, so if you feel that you can build a new schema for your API, feel free to do so. But if you want to just follow the workshop, I mean, stick to my code. So over here, if you look at the schema, we have 3 resources. Okay, I mean 3 models to be precise, and this schema is very simple for you to get started with Prisma and the DB and things like that. But when you talk about real production grade applications, you would not just have 3 or 2 models. You would have a lot of models that are correlated with each other. So talking about relations, we looked at what foreign keys are, right? So imagine we have a post. In any blog, you would have a post, right? So a blog is basically a post, and in any blogging application, people would probably sign up and create posts in it. So let's say each post has these 5 attributes. Let's look at what these are. The first attribute, you have a post ID. I told you each post should be uniquely identifiable through a primary key. Over here, this would be our primary key. It's an ID. You identify the resource using this primary key. So over here at Prisma, you have subsequent terminologies to address them. So whenever you say post ID is the primary key of this model of the post table, in Prisma it's transpiled into an ID. You call that an ID. And of course tables are visualized as models in here, and you know the rest. So let's go through one by one. We have a post ID, we have a content, we have a title, and we have an author ID. So this is important, right? What can this author ID have? And what, of course it's an integer. What will it have? What will the author ID be? Does anybody have a guess? I have other models. So what would this author ID be? The user ID, right? So you cannot have any random author ID in here. First, the user needs to be enrolled as a user, and that user ID can only be linked to a post. So not anybody cannot create a post in our blogging platform, right? Only the users who have enrolled or registered in our platform can only create a new post. So in any post, you have another attribute that says author ID. This essentially, author ID is related to the users table through a foreign key, but over here we call that a relation. Okay, so you mark a relation that says @relation, and the fields is the field that you infer on the same model. So let's not get confused, but just know that this is how you link one attribute from a particular resource to the other resource that you are trying to relate with, right? We are trying to relate with post and the user object, and over here you say author ID is referred to the user ID in the users table, in the users model, right? I mean, is it clear? Just by looking at it, are you able to get something out of it? User is mapped to a post. Are you able to infer this from looking at the post and the user model? If you can do this, you have a pretty good idea of how Prisma works, and you don't even need me to get from Prisma here onwards. So is it clear for everybody? You are mapping a user to a post. Is that clear? Are you able to identify this? Yes. Everybody? Yeah. No, that's not nullable. I'll get back to that later. I have a confusion in that. It's not nullable. Okay, so just for now, know that you are mapping a user with a post. Is that clear? Shall we proceed? So even for the ones who are designing your DB for the Cortex or any other projects at Pattarai, it's always easy for you to work with JSON objects or in this format, rather than going and clicking the foreign key attribute, setting up your schema manually on any SQL solutions, right? It's really hard when you do that. But over here, you see what's actually happening, and you are able to actually identify how these DBs are related with each other in an object fashion, right? So it's always easy for you to do this way. And after doing this, after setting up your entire schema, now user is mapped to a post, and of course for each user you have a profile, and that profile can have a profile ID, it can have a bio, or it can even have a what kind? We can have a DP, a display profile, a display pic. It's totally up to you. You can define it, you can play with it. So let's get going with the basic attributes that we have right now. Okay, so let's imagine you have defined the schema on by yourself, and we need the schema to be replicated on the DB. Right now we have a file. This is the markup of our DB, but this doesn't actually exist in the DB. We don't have the skeleton set up in our database, right? To do that, we are going to do a command, and it's called npx prisma. You say db push. Okay, the moment you do this, the schema gets replicated on the DB. So it reads the schema from this file. Let me quickly save the file. So if everything is right and all the configuration is done and ready, we should be able to push this schema back to the database. So I tried doing that. So let's see what happens. It's gonna take some while. Yeah, it's done. You can see that it says our database is now in sync with the schema. So it's pretty straightforward, right? And it was easy to, rather than going and setting up your schema or writing hundreds and thousands of lines of database descriptive, all these SQL code, right? You don't even need to learn SQL anymore. You don't even need any of it anymore. Everything is abstracted. That doesn't mean you shouldn't understand SQL. It's always better, but I'm saying it made things easier for you. So let's check if our DB got replicated on the database. You head over to beekeeper, refresh the databases so that we have the tables. Cool. We have a post, we have a profile, we have a user, right? Is everybody on track with me? Cool. Just stop me if you are stuck anywhere. Don't hesitate to do so. So cool. Once we've replicated our database, the next thing that any backend developer would do is to put in some sample data for you to build an API, right? A very common task that everybody who works on backend does is they would probably go to the beekeeper studio. They will say view data, and probably they would just enter a few records just to test. These are sample data that any backend developer would have to do it manually, and this is very, very tiresome. If you ask any backend developer who is actually doing it right now using this way, this is one of the most boring tasks of a backend developer, putting sample data. And here's the catch, here's the best part. Prisma also takes care of this. You don't even have to put sample data yourself. You don't have to suffer putting all these random data, tens and hundreds of sample data for you to test your actual backend, right? Let's imagine you're building a front end. Let's say you are building a backend API, and this API requires you to send out a list of users. Without users existing in the database, you won't be able to test it out, right? So the first thing that you would normally do after creating a schema is to put sample data. So to do that, we are going to do something that goes under the name seed. Okay, of course everybody knows what's a seed. A seed is essentially something that grows, and here you have a tool, you have an option to set up a Prisma seed. Okay, so far, is everybody on track with me? Is everybody able to understand what's happening? I'm gonna stop here in a while because I need to know, because hereafter it's gonna be hands-on, and I don't want anybody to stop anywhere, be stuck anywhere. Is it okay? Yeah. What error? It's okay if you want to stream. Okay. Yeah. So this is a yes. Didn't anybody have the same problem? If Gabriel had this error, everybody should have had it, because your data. Look at this file, schema.prisma. It clearly says that it's taking the value of the database URL from the environment variable, right? So in our previous classes, if I think if most of you attended, we declare environment files with environment variables for us to put our important credentials, right? So our connection URL, so we had something from the Heroku database, right? We took out the connection URL. You must have put it in a .env file that it normally wouldn't exist in your file. For the ones who who are facing the same problem, I want you to do this. Do cp and you say .env.example and you say .env. So you are basically making a copy of the example env file into a .env file, and this .env file will have the actual DB connection string, and this won't be tracked on GitHub. We want that to happen. So after doing this, you would have a file similar to this, and I want you to replace the database URL with the one that you have from Heroku. Okay, and after that it might work out of the box. It will work out of the box. Okay. Gabriel. Okay, I want you to create a new duplicate file that goes under the name .env. The contents of the file should be exactly same as you find on the example file. You have a .env.example. I want you to create a new file that goes by the name .env, paste it over there, and instead of the database URL which you already have there, you replace it with the connection URI that you got from Heroku. You created a database, right, on Heroku, a Postgres database. You take that connection URI and put it over here. Okay, and after doing that, I mean, if you didn't do that, you shouldn't have been able to push the schema in the first place. So yep, I think you missed that part. So anyway, you want us to wait? I mean, I just want to know if anybody else is facing the problem. We can wait. We have time. Yeah, perfect. Just let me know if you need time, okay? I mean, does anybody have any doubts in this, or you are just doing it and it takes time? React to my message once you're done. mean, why is it taking time? Is anybody stuck with anything? We'll figure it out. Heroku is not responding. Just head over to the Heroku app platform and check if everything's alright. Sometimes your app might be down and it might take some time for it to get back up. Okay, now I want you to go to heroku.com, go to the dashboard. You're not able to log into Heroku. Yeah, I think it's loading for me too. Heroku is down, I think. Yeah, we let's wait for another couple of seconds. It says it's all right. I mean, Heroku is down. That's I mean, even if you're yeah, you can get it from there. Just do this. It's actually a roundabout way, but you don't have a way to get the URL directly. But I'll tell you what to do. It's gonna take some time, but I don't think we can do anything else other than waiting for Heroku to come back. I think it's back. Should be back. I mean, is it the same for everybody, or is anybody able to log into your Heroku? Same, even I'm not able to get into Heroku. Okay, can somebody do a quick check if your DB works? I mean, if you are able to get into your database. Let me check. Yeah, the DB is active. Okay, let's do this then. Okay, we are going to create the connection URL by ourselves. So if you have the Beekeeper Studio open, I want you to do this. Okay, open the connection settings. You might have all the credentials over there, right? And yes, so let's do this. This connection string is basically a concatenated way of showing your credentials, right? You have the username, you have the password, and you have the host ID, you have the port number, and you have the database name, right? So I'll paste my version of this DB config. I want you to recreate your own configuration URL. So I'll probably do it for one person's config, or maybe I can even try it on my own. So I want you to do this. It's a very roundabout way, but since we don't have Heroku, we might have to do that. Let me just quickly try if we can get Heroku one last time, so that, I mean, if somebody has any VPN set up, can somebody quickly give it a try? Do it on a VPN and let me know. Okay, then I think it's gonna take some while. Okay, leave this. Let's quickly get our own connection URL string. Okay, you have the URL. I pasted right in the coder chart. So look at the URL string. The first thing that you find, right? The first set of string hex that you find is basically your username. So instead of the username, replace it with your username that you find on Beekeeper Studio. You have the connection URL, right? You have the Heroku DB, and this is my user. So copy your user from there and paste it over the first string. After doing that, copy the password and paste it at the next. I don't think that's copy. You can copy from that. I don't think you can copy from that. Okay, I think we are stuck. Just give it a second. We'll try to get Heroku. Shall we wait? Let me know if you can get Heroku somehow. It's like super annoying. I think you can take a quick break until we figure this out. I mean, is anybody able to get the password from Beekeeper Studio? If you can, well and good. You can directly create your own connection string and put it over at the database URL. If you cannot do that, I'm afraid we don't have any other option. Where the password? Where? Yeah. Oh, super. Perfect. Then do that. Copy URL. No, actually the problem with that is, Pinto, you don't get the password along with it. You tried that? yeah. Let's do something. For now, just look at my screen. Let's figure this out, and after we get the Heroku up and running, we'll do it again so that everybody is able to do it. So right now, let me just quickly explain what's happening, and we'll get started. Shall we? Okay. So yeah, once you do that, you might have your DB set up and you have all the models defined. So let's quickly push it to the DB, and we already have the schema ready on the database. So I was talking about a process that goes by the name seed, right? Seeding a database. So you seed a database to put data in it, and the next thing that we will be doing is seeding our database. To start, you create a new file where you name it seed.ts, right? Of course, it can be C.js, but since we are going with a TypeScript boilerplate, we are going to stick with a TypeScript format. Okay. After doing that, just give me a sec. Yes, so I was just copying seed. Okay, so a seed is basically a function that you call when you want to seed the database, right? So this seed will take care of creating fake records in our database. So if you look at the top, we have a module that goes by the name Faker. Faker.js is one of the most used backend testing tools that is available on the internet. Okay, so Faker.js is basically, you can generate any email, you can generate any random names, you can generate random phone numbers. So it is basically going to be the guy who creates fake records for your database, right? So you define, Prisma basically has a template for you to create a seed file. You can use this template, or you can create your own seed template, which basically does this. Any seed would have to do this. Okay, in that seed file, you would connect to the Prisma. Of course, you define a Prisma client and you connect to it. And what you do is you probably set a function that gets you a random data. And if you look at this function, right, it has data. It has email, it has name, it has posts. And if you look at it, for each name, for each email, for each post, you have a fake entry, faker.internet.email, faker.name.firstname. So Faker.js takes care of all the duplicate or creating random records in your database part. So this part would obviously create all the fake entries, and you would probably map it with the above function and create users for all the random records, right? Is it clear for you, or is it you need not understand the concept of seeding entirely, but just know that this seed script would talk to the DB, create random records for you to play with, for you to develop your app, right? Are we being clear? And at the top you have a few variables, so a sort of a parameters that you can set. Let's say you want to have maximum of 10 posts that could be generated through the seed. You can set it over here. You can have a number of users, you can have a number of profiles. Okay, so this is how you basically set up a seed. And they have a template. If you want, you can use it, or you can go with your own your own function that takes care of creating the seed. After declaring a seed.ts file, the next step that you would probably do is do npx prisma, and you say db seed, or I think seed alone would work. Just give me a sec. Yeah, for our seed to work, let's define a script that's going to take care of seeding the database. Okay, I'm going to call it seed, and let's say I do ts node prisma /c.ts. So this basically talks to the c.ts file. It executes the c.ts file and generates all the records that we needed earlier, right? It seeds the database. So is this part clear? We are going to seed our database, and let's see what happens. I'm gonna save it, and I'm gonna do npm run seed. So this is how you run a script. Says module not found. Oh yeah, we didn't install faker.js, right? So in order to install faker.js, you do npm install, what's the name? Let's look at the faker npm package. Yes, it's npm install faker. You have to make sure that you install the correct repository, because most of these packages would have different names, and if you were to install a wrong package, you might get into any vulnerabilities. And recently this faker.js package has a lot of controversies, because in fact a hacker even tried to make a scam out of this faker.js package. So maybe if you're free, look it up at the internet, look at what faker.js had anything to do with vulnerabilities over the last month. Okay, so we, of course, now it's fixed, that's why I'm gonna use it. So let's get into it. So once we've installed npm faker, let's run the seed. What's happening? Did I forget to save it? Does anybody know what's happening? Or okay, perfect, thank you. So let's run the same command. It's not able to find faker. Let's try installing it once more. Oh yeah, I think I told you, right, there was a vulnerability in faker. It's still not fixed. So if you look at the node modules, there's this one, the developer of this faker module, right, he deleted all instances of his packages available on GitHub, available on npm and everywhere. So right now nobody would be able to use faker, and I forgot that. Yeah, let's look at the GitHub repository, for instance. Look, somebody edited his repository and made sure all the commits go with the name ngame, and he deleted everything and kept this one readme that goes by the name Aaron Swartz. So this guy Aaron Swartz was a very big league hacker. So if you're free, look up what happened to this repository, and because it's a very famous repository. So if you look at it, it has more than 1.5k. I don't know. I thought they fixed it, but apparently they didn't fix it. This is gonna make things more harder for us. So let's look at if there are any other faker libraries. This is what this is a very dangerous thing when it comes to production. So this is why people say dependencies are very important, and you should take a huge caution when it comes to using dependencies. So let's say we were supposed to use faker.js for our production app, and tomorrow somebody plays around with any of your dependencies. If anything fails, your entire application might just go down, like what happened with us, right? So Pinto, do you have any faker libraries? Yep. Perfect. Nice. Thank you. So we will be installing it as a developer dependency. development dependency. I'm just quickly gonna uninstall the previous. So we install Faker.js from this different repository, and it should work. I mean, we are having a lot of unfortunate events, but let's see what's happening. So it goes by a different name, so we are just gonna change the import at the top of our seed. Yep, and that should work. So let's rerun the script npm run seed. It's gonna take some time to talk with the database, create the records for us. Usually you would create it manually. It depends on the developer. Prisma gives you a sort of a template for you to work with, but it's very simple if you understand what's happening inside the seed file. You know how we created records, right? How you create a record. You say prisma.user.create on any existing resource that you have on the Prisma, right? So let's say we have a user. To create a new user, you give it a data object. You give it a user object to create. But if you look at the seed file, what we are doing as on the whole is we are using a function that runs on a loop, talks to the Faker.js file. It generates random names and records and pushes it to the database. It creates records with the random user created from iterating through the loop, right? If you look at the top, it's basically a map function. What is a map function? You map you have a map function that iterates through an array. So we are talking to an array that has the number of users. So let's say we have 10. So for each user, it's going to create a fake entry, and we are just merely calling it and putting it over at this main function. So this main function basically iterates through all the Faker.js, iterates through all the 10 users, gets random information from the Faker.js library, and creates users for us through Prisma in the database. So that's what's happening here. I mean, if you understand it, you can create your own seed file, or if you wanna get started with any other thing, it's okay. It's for you to create, and it's totally up to the developer to create a seed file. You don't even need a seed file if you ask me in the beginning, but we will need it at the when you start testing your APIs, right? Am I being clear? Cool. So the seed file should have created our DB records. So let's check if everything is set up and ready for us to start coding. So I should be able to view my database, connect to my database and check if I have those records. So let me check if for users, yeah, we have fake data for us, right? So I'm going to quickly paste the seed file for you to test this out, so that everybody stays on the same page. So for the ones who don't have your DB access yet, just follow up with me and bear with me. We'll get your things done, and it shouldn't be a problem for you because you can always follow up later. It's not a huge deal. You're just gonna call the seed file and run it. So this is how your seed file should look. Is it okay? And the command and your package.json file should be changed for you to run this command, or you can just straight away use this command and run your script. You say npx and this. For you to start seeding your file. So after you've successfully seeded your entire database, and if you have everything ready, you should be able to start working with a with the actual endpoints. So shall we get started? I mean, until now is everything clear, and I know there have been setbacks, but let's get to the endpoints quickly. So let me know if we can proceed, so that and meanwhile, can somebody check if Heroku is back online? It's still not up. Okay. Shall we get going, or should we? Is somebody trying it out, and do you need time? Anybody from the Cortex team? Is anybody trying this out? Okay, team. Maybe for the ones who don't have the DB yet, you can do this. You can use my connection URL. Don't run the script. Don't run the seed file. I think you can run the seed file. It might probably create another 10 new records. Okay. Use my own DB connection string that I put earlier. Right. You have it on the top. So you can probably use it if you don't have access to your DB. Don't just delete anything on the schema, so that, I mean, we are going to be using that. So you can of course use my DB for you to get going with the workshop. Okay, shall we get started? And if you wanna try seeding your database, let me know. We can probably spend another 2 to 4 minutes for you to test it out. Even if you are gonna use my DB URL, you are free to try the seed out, because it's gonna be destructive. It's gonna just create more records into the database. Just let me know if you're gonna do that. If nobody's gonna do it, we need not waste time waiting. Why is nobody talking? Are you trying it or not? Okay. You got the records. You created more records using the seed? Perfect. And if you need more data, of course, you will rerun the seed again and again, or you might just go and change the values that you have on the top, so that it does everything on one go. So this is very, very useful when it comes to testing. Usually we spend a lot of time, like I told, right? So this eventually solves in a lot of development time for us. We even have dedicated people for you to people when it comes to backend, who will create these fake records and set up the database with sample data. But Prisma actually is making things way easier, if you can notice. So I'm gonna put another message, so just react to it if you're done seeding your database. Even if you are not gonna seed your database, just react on it. And for the ones who've already done it, take a quick break, go get some water or do something. Let's be back here at another 4 minutes. So let's take a quick 4 to 5 minute break and be right back. Shall we do that? So by that time, everybody please try finishing your seeding and check it out. Okay? Makes sense? Yeah, that's okay. Okay, then I'll be back. shoot. Okay, never mind. Cool. So this is how you send an object back as a response. Okay. So when you design an API, I want you to do another thing. Okay. It's very important that you set the status number. By default, whenever you send a response without any errors, it's gonna be a 200, right? I told you that 200 means okay, the response was alright and you were able to send back a proper response back to the front end. And of course, when you have 500, it means that something happened internally in the server and something might have gone wrong. And you have 404, which essentially means that you were not able to identify the resource available on the backend. I know there was no resource or there was no endpoint for it. There are multiple cases for these endpoints. So these are basic things that you would normally do. And in our case, let's hard code, let's set the status to be 200. So now my response status object will be, response object will have a status of 200. And of course, here I can set any status objects. So let's say we created a user and you check if the user ID is a prime number. So let's say the front end needs to know if the user ID is a prime number and do something with it. Of course, nobody would need that, but let's say hypothetically it needs the user ID to be a prime number. So you check if the user is a prime number, do something with it. If it's a prime number, you can probably set the status to be 201. And if it's not a prime number, you can set 200. So in this way, you can probably have different. You can probably set up different ways to talk back to your backend. So this is just one way of doing it, and you can pretty much say if it's basically up to you. You can probably set up different use cases for the statuses and do things with it. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to create a new object, and the first parameter that I normally would use is I would set a success attribute, and this is going to tell me if my response was true. It's totally up to you. You can either do this or you can probably send the user object directly like this, right? So this user object would have all my created record, right? My created new record of the new user. I can probably send it directly, or I can do a new way of, I can do this so that the guy on the front end knows that my request was success. Of course, he will be able to know using the status. This is just another way of sending, having abstracted levels of sending success messages. So my created user would be the new user. So far, does it make sense? We didn't do any error handling. It's just us creating a new user and sending back a response. Is it clear? Okay, so let's try running it and let's try giving it a request. So let's see what happens. So I do npm run dev and my server should start. It shouldn't have any problem. And if it doesn't have any problem, let me open my Postman. Yes. Yup, it should open quickly. Let's try pinging that endpoint with a user object, right? After this, things are very straightforward here on. So let's say we have a user endpoint, and it's a user's endpoint, right? So let's get back to Postman. Does anybody, can anybody identify what I'm doing wrong here? I did a mistake here. Can anybody identify what I've done wrong here? Of course, there's that, but there's another mistake that I did. Yeah, it's localhost. It's gonna be running on my localhost. What's the other mistake that I did? The name. Okay, let's say I give some object, But that's not the issue. There's another problem. Okay, what? Perfect. How it should be? Why should it be /API? See, you should always check if the endpoints are right. So it's not /API, it's /v1. Of course, what would you do if you want to have /API in the front of this endpoint? What would you do? Pinto? Perfect. So you'll have another endpoint that says API, and this is how you change, right? So right now it's just /v1 prepended to the endpoints that we declare. So let's stick to API, v1, and let's try testing it. So we have v1 /users, and we're going to talk to it through the post method. So let's say I give it a name, and that's going to be Fabian, and my email. Cool. So let's see what happens. I'm sending a request. So what did I get? My new record got created. I was assigned a new user ID, and my created user object got returned. So let's verify if we were able to create the DB on the record. On the database, right? We were able to create the record on the database. So when I hit refresh, it should show me my name. I think everybody's trying out the seeding, so never mind. Anyway, we should be able to find my name. Let me quickly sort it. Yeah, we have it, right? We have Fabian Ferno, and I have my user ID 31, and I have fabianferno@gmail.com. So this is how you create. And hereafter, it's pretty simple. Now you know how you can call Prisma and its methods to pretty much do anything that you need. Okay, let's say I need to create the other methods, right? You have CRUD, and in CRUD we were able to do the creating part. So quickly we'll get done with the other methods. So it's going to be read, and it's going to be get, and I'm going to call it get user. So let me just quickly declare all the methods available on this route. So I have a get method, I have a get method handler, I have an update method handler. What do you use for update? You use put, and I declare another controller method that goes by the name update user, and finally I have a delete endpoint, and it's a delete method. Right? Once I save it, it should arrange itself in this way. So now you have a route, and in that route you have all these 4 methods that you can perform on it, right? Cool. So let's get back to the controller and quickly define all these. I'm not gonna waste our time because we have a lot to cover and even more advanced things than this. So I just want to know if you understood how we create a user. I want you to be thorough with this, because all the other methods are pretty straightforward. You won't really have any trouble knowing what these are, but I just want you to understand what's happening here and what we exactly did now. Okay, just let me know if you are thorough with this. Why is nobody talking? Thorough. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna take Veroni's word and I'm gonna proceed. So If anybody has trouble following, please let me know. So what, yeah, is somebody trying to say something? Yep. Yeah, it would crash because we haven't declared all these endpoints. So it will crash. We will fix that eventually. We haven't yet declared all these methods yet, so it will throw a crash, so bear with it. So we'll fix it. So head back to your controller, declare the other set of controllers. I think at this point it's pretty straightforward and anybody can do this. So let's say I declare a get method and it's gonna do this, and I'm gonna quickly get the ID from the body. So you have a find one method on Prisma. So on any model that you have on Prisma, there's a method that says find one. So what find one method essentially does is it gets in, it checks, evaluates for a given parameter and matches where the particular parameter has in the database, right? So you have an ID, you check if it matches with this ID, and it finds one and it gets back the record. I think it's not find one. It's find first. Yep. And in our DB, if you noticed, in our schema we have the user model, right? So it's user underscore ID. So if I have user underscore ID on my schema, I should very well use the same on my endpoint. I mean, in the request body, it can be ID. If I'm going to use ID from the front end, I would probably need to change it over here, so that the user ID matches with the ID that I get from here. So or the other way to do it is probably set user ID over here itself and tell the front end developer to use user ID using the user underscore ID parameter. Okay. Once it's done, we have the user object. The next thing that you do is you send back the user. You set the success status, you send the user, and done. And finally you close the controller. It's pretty straightforward, right? And most of these methods, you need not memorize it, you need not study it. For every Prisma method, you would probably have documentation available on the prisma.docs file, right? And it's just gonna be straightforward, and you need not memorize it. As and when you use it, it will stick to you. So right now, I highly recommend you using the basic methods available: find first, or find, or you have create, and you have delete, and all of these are just self-explanatory. You need not, it's no Greek and Latin. So just by looking at it, you will be able to understand. So right now we have a get endpoint declared. So let's get going with declaring all the other endpoints, and finally we'll test all of these at the end. So rather than wasting our time and testing every single endpoint here and then. So I have a user ID, I have a name, and yeah, let me just quickly be done with it. So I'll explain the part later. And for the ones who are wondering what I'm doing, I'm just using GitHub Copilot to do all of the things for me. It's like an AI completion where you need not actually code. I highly recommend you using that, because as a backend developer, I write 90% of my code is not done by me. It's like generated by this AI. So it's useful actually when in terms of development. My advice is don't really stick to this GitHub Copilot. Sometimes it's really useful when you need to code for a hackathon, or when you need to code in a time constrained environment, right? But don't get accustomed to using GitHub Copilot, because at one point of time, GitHub Copilot will be paid, and you have to pay for using GitHub Copilot. Okay, So at that point, if you cannot really use GitHub Copilot, it might be feeling like you losing a limb, or you're not being able to code properly, right? So don't do it. I'm setting a very bad example here. So I am going to declare another. Stop me if you don't understand any code that I'm writing, because all the code that I'm writing right now are pretty self-explanatory. We get a user ID, we match the record which goes under the same user ID that I gave in the request, and delete it, right? All the methods are pretty straightforward. I need not even explain it to you, right? So if you don't understand any piece of code that I'm currently typing, just let me know. Cool. So we successfully declared all the, we defined all the 4 endpoints. We declared a get user, we declared an update user, we declared a delete user, right? So do y'all have any doubts in this? This is basically what you need to do, what you need in terms of backend and DB operations. Is it clear? Cool. I'm not going to test it right now. I hope you know how to test it. I'll be pushing this code. I want you all to test it and let me know if it really works. I'll be pushing all my code to my repository. I think I shared it earlier. So it's almost time. I don't want to waste time. So the next thing that we will do is getting information related to another table, right? So we had posts. So let's look at our database and try to get some valid data out of it. Okay. So you have posts, and this essentially has all the blog posts that you have. So let's try getting a particular information. So you have an author ID 1, 2, 3 and so on. Yeah, cool. So I'm gonna try getting a post that matches for the author ID 19. Okay, I'm not just gonna do that. Let me define what my requirement is basically. So I need a way to write an endpoint. This endpoint should talk to the backend, get me it has a request object that says author ID. So whenever I give author ID to my endpoint, that endpoint should talk to the backend, talk to this post table, get the post associated with author ID 19, right? So I have author ID 19 and I have probably 10 posts that match with this. I need not just that, I also need the profile details matched along with this author ID. So where will I go for my details for a particular author ID? For a particular author ID, I will go to the profile table, right? So I will need to talk to this table and check if there's I have this 19. I have a profile for the author ID 19. So what I will need to do is, I will need to talk to my post table, get all the posts matched, and also get the associated user profile for a particular author ID, right? Shall we do that? Am I being clear what my requirement was? Yes, sure. So my requirement is, I will be giving a user ID, okay, to this endpoint. So let's call this endpoint /post, okay, and this post endpoint should get me the matched author ID. So I gave it an ID, right, in the body. So it should take this ID, check with the DB and match all the posts, all the blog posts that match under this particular author ID, right? This particular ID, user ID, which matches for the post. Is this part clear? This is the first step. After getting all the posts, all the blog posts that match under a particular author ID, I also need to get information about this author. I need all his profile details. I need his profile detail along with his data. Okay, I need this. I need all of this to be done within let's say within an endpoint, within 1 DB, within 1 Prisma operation. That's my requirement. So shall we do it? Are we clear on what we are going to do here? I want somebody to repeat what I just said, what we are gonna do here. Can somebody do it for the sake of understanding, do it for the sake of people? Can somebody repeat what I said? What is our requirement? What are we gonna do here? Don't be quick. We'll quickly be done, and after this your Cortex team can actually get started with your endpoints. Yeah, their profile from this table. So if you notice, we have three tables, right? So we are going to get information through all these tables on a single Prisma operation, on a single call. That's what we're going to do here. Okay, is it clear for everybody? Cool. So let's define an endpoint. So for this, I'm going to declare another controller. I'm going to need another resource. So let's call it, my first step of creating another resource in my API would be to create a new folder. So I'm going to call it post. Okay. So the second step would be to create a controller. So I'm going to call it post.controller.ts. And I need a route file to route all my endpoints, right? So I have post.route.ts. I'm just gonna quickly copy paste what I have on users.route so that I can get started. Usually you would import a router, you would import the controller from the other file, you would declare a user object, you declare a controller object. So basically for you to set up things for you to start routing, right? So you can probably take it from another file that you already have and put it over this new file. And I'm gonna quickly clear out all the defined endpoints right now. And the only endpoint that I'm gonna need for now is gonna be get. It's gonna be a get handler, and it's not gonna get all my users. It's gonna get all my blocks under user. Get all blocks under user, or let me say, just to make things easier, get blocks. So I'm gonna quickly rename users to blogs, or better, posts. Cool. So let me quickly replicate what I have here on the users.controller into post.controller. So I'm gonna delete all the existing endpoints, existing controllers. So cool. So I have an empty controller that is gonna handle my post. Right? So this is basically it. So I'm gonna declare my first controller that we will be developing. So it's get blogs, and so the first thing that I get is the author ID. Right? So we get the author ID. The first step is done. So the next step is talking to the post resource and getting all the records that match under a particular author ID. Right? So I check where the author ID matches my author ID and close it. So this is what we already know this, right? The only new thing in this endpoint is this new method that says find menu. So in the previous endpoint we used find first, so it iterates through all the records and gets me the first matched record. So in here it's going to return every record that you found, and it's just going to throw it as an array of records, right? I hope it's obvious and things are pretty straightforward here. You need not have me explaining everything. So right now it's gonna get me the matched author IDs. So what am I missing here? What do I need to do next? What else was my requirement? I have my author ID. I got an author ID from the request object. I talk to my posts. I talk to my DB through Prisma. I'm able to get all my matched author ID, matched posts, blogs under a particular author ID. So what was my other requirement? Get their profile. Okay. I told you that in the schema.prisma file we had a relation, right? So this essentially means that all the author ID is having an implicit connection, is having an implicit relation within the user object. So if I need any details from the user's model, I can directly use it. So how do you use it? So that's what we're gonna do here. So to use any relation, you say include. Okay, you say include, and we need users. We need to return data from the users endpoint. So you say users or user, and you say true. Quickly be done with it. Okay, that's another problem. Okay, I've been doing it the other way around. So let's get the user information first, and then let's get the post. Okay. So the same way, and you declare you get the author object, and you talk to the DB. You get the user. You match it with the find first. You say where my author ID matches with the user ID. Close it. It seems to be wrong. User, right? And if you notice, if I have the wrong model over here, it will throw me error. So TypeScript is coming to our rescue here, so that problem is solved. So cool. So we have a user object. So now we have the user, but our requirement needed us to get his profile along with it, right? So to do that, you have this include. So include basically checks for all the relations associated with it. So my relations was post, and I also need all the matching profile with it. It shouldn't be throwing me an error, but let's see what happens. Yep. So we have a user, and we're going to return all the posts associated with it. Let's try what happens, and we're going to be done with the workshop. I mean, we're almost done. So let's try talking to this endpoint. We should be able to get the author ID that matches 19. So let's try 19. I'm going to create a new request, and that's going to be the same. And here it's, instead of users, I'm going to have blogs, And also make sure that your blogs endpoint is accessible on your app. So if you head over to the index.ts file, you have used this user's endpoint, right? But we haven't yet declared an endpoint for blogs, so we better do that. First step would be to import it. And then you use it. So now my endpoint would be accessible. I'm gonna head over to Postman. We have blogs, and I send in our data. I'm gonna call it thanks for reminding. Okay, let me quickly change it to get. Okay, where? Yeah. Okay, I get it. Thanks. Let's call post, and I'm gonna give it an author ID. Let's say 19. Hopefully there's a record for 19. Yep. So fingers crossed, sending a request and throws an error. There's a get endpoint. That seems to be the problem. Okay. Yeah, this happens. You have to send in the right data type, right? And you can also have error handlers that takes care of this. You can always send back. Prisma tells you what might have gone wrong, right? So it got invalid value 19 on Prisma. So it provided string, but it expected int. It says, right? So we can set up event handlers. Probably we'll do it over the next session. So if I send this, it should get me the result. I'm gonna quickly save it. Yep, my server restarted, and now let's try. So can you look at my response? I talk to the backend. I have my user object, and I have all the posts that match under a particular user. I mean, does everybody get what I'm trying to do here? I mean, does everybody get it? Or do you want me to quickly do a recap and we'll be done for the day? Yep. So our requirement was to get a particular author ID, match it with the blogs that we have on a database, get those blogs. Along with the blogs, we need the user information from the users table, right? So look at it. So the first thing that you do is identify which would be your primary table, right? So you have author ID, and your requirement was to get information about the user and the blogs. If you look at both of these tables, the user information can only be the user is the first the first entity that you talk to, right? The user has blog posts. So in terms of these relations, you always choose the primary model. In our case, it was the user model. So you the first thing that you do on your endpoint is you get the user information, right? You match the user ID with the given author ID. The cool thing about Prisma is it gives you the option to get back the related records along with it. So whenever you say include the parameter, this essentially says that whatever key value that you give inside this this will be used to match with the relations and get back the relations along with this operation, right? If you don't do this, if you don't have this include, it would just get you the user ID and matched user object, right? You would have email, you would have name, you would have user ID. This we tried this earlier, right? We were able to get information about a user. The moment I say include posts, Prisma is able to automatically talk to the DB, get the foreign key relations, and do all the things abstracted without even us doing anything, right? So we just say I need to get posts along with it. You can also, if you have more relations, if you have any other tables associated with it, you would probably add them and you say true, you set their state to be true. So now all your returned records would have all the details that you queried. So over here, the best part about Prisma is, if you want to do the same thing that you've done here, right, using Flask, or if you're using any other native DB raw queries, you would probably first get the user object, first talk to the database, do some raw query to the database, get the user object, and then you take that user ID, talk to the post endpoint, blog endpoint, blog table, get all the matched author IDs that match under a particular blog. So it's really cumbersome, and it's not really advisable to do that way. Now it's very easy. Now you just built an endpoint in probably less than 10 seconds, right? It makes things way easier for you. That's why I've been trying to tell you that Prisma makes things easier for you. So now for your Cortex project, you can probably sit and finish up 15 to 20 endpoints in a single day, right? Isn't that possible? I mean, you get it right. So that's all we were trying to do here. So I hope everybody have a fair understanding of what we did, and a fair understanding of what we will be doing over building APIs on the backend. So the only thing that we missed out so far, apart from covering how you build APIs and how you can do CRUD operations on APIs, the only thing that's pending is authorizing your APIs for access, right? So you shouldn't be letting anybody access these endpoints. These are very important. Let's say these are important blogs, and you don't need anybody to mess with it. So we will be looking at how you authorize these endpoints over the next session. So that will be the final session, and that's totally up to you. If you want, you can join. That's totally optional, but we will be having it probably. We will let you know the dates for it. It won't be tomorrow. It won't be day after tomorrow. It's probably a catch-up session that we will be having later on. So probably by today or tomorrow, I'll be giving you a task, since everybody is comfortable using Prisma by now, and I think everybody have a fair understanding of what's actually happening, and you will be able to code using Prisma, and you have an understanding of how you use this boilerplate, right? So you can expect a task which we will be putting it on the GitHub Classroom. So wait for it, and after completing all your tasks, you will be getting your certificates and all the perks associated with it. Don't just do it for the certificate. My aim behind you completing this workshop was for you to be able to build actual functioning scalable backends and backend applications, right? So the task would be simple. You would probably build a fully functional API, not just these 4 CRUD endpoints. I want you to mess around with it. The application will be more tedious than this. It will have more relations. It will have a bigger schema. So you can expect that. So do you have any other questions, or we can wind up for the day? It's been 20 minutes past the workshop ending time. So yep. Yes. Prisma, you're talking about Prisma. I didn't hear it. I mean, is it Prisma? Are you talking about Prisma? ExpressJS on the whole. It's not just for backend. It's actually a full web framework. you can use it for front end. So this workshop actually focused on how you can use Express for backend. It didn't really focus on how you generate views and the front end aspects. We didn't cover that. You can actually use it for front end if you need. It's a fully capable solution. I mean, it's totally flexible. If you want, if you yourself want to build a rendering engine, if you yourself want to build a templating system, rather than going with React or Vue.js or all the other fancy JavaScript libraries, you can stick with ExpressJS. It also gives you the perks of the server side programming along with it. So it's like it's you can associate it with Django or any other frameworks, but the only perk that you have here is it's totally flexible. You need not have a particular project structure. You need not have particular models to be defined. It's totally up to you. Express is very flexible, and it's faster if you ask me. I've tried Flask and I've tried Express. Its speed is almost 2 times faster. Yeah, it's actually faster. I would say, let's say you want to do some processing, you have AI or you have any image processing. I would obviously choose Python or Flask when you have processes like that. But I would always recommend you using Express when it's just CRUD operations, or when it's just getting some request objects and doing some minor processing on it and sending back the response. That's where you use Express. But Python always has its perks, so I'm not against Python. Yeah. I mean, does anybody else have any questions? I think it's already late. It's almost 8:23. So, Jason, then if you have any feedbacks or if you have any announcements you can make, I think we'll wind up for the day. Yep.